This week on Noia Dev, we've got two big things to cover. We're covering the starting area and the creation of, and player-run buff shops. Let's get into this. From the inception of Noia, I understood that art was going to be a very big part of development. In fact, art is like 80% or something of development of most games. I had picked an artist called Final Boss Blues on Patreon. They have a huge, extensive library of many different tile sets and monsters and icons and all sorts of really good things that I felt that I could make use of, and it would give Noia a pretty good theme. And it wasn't until I really started trying to map out this beginning area that I realized that the tile set for the forest that Final Boss Blues puts out just was not working for me. And so I started my search anew for some tile sets that I thought would work well. There's always free ones out there, but then you're stuck with this mishmash of some free, some paid for, and none of them look the same. And so I was trying to limit myself to a few artists. I don't think I could ever stick with just one, but trying to limit it to a few. And so I came across Clockwork Raven and his Raven Fantasy set, and it was a little dark, or desaturated rather, for my liking. So I actually took the forest tile set into GIMP and bumped up the saturation a little bit, and now it looks like this. Armed with that, and now that I have a tile set that I can work with, I am not an environmental designer. I have no experience in environmental design. I've read up on it. I know some mild fundamentals, but an environmental design artist, I am not. So with that, I took to, again, looking for inspiration from other maps and other games, and actually found a mixture of fan-made Pokemon maps. This map was actually the Lyre Forest from Pokemon Ranger that was then upscaled to the 5th gen Pokemon tile set. And I took one look at this and I was like, that is the look and feel that I want for this starting area. So what I aim to do here is essentially trace over this map initially, and then I will slowly cut into it and add and remove things and make it my own. But for the start, we're going to do one for one trace over this map with the Raven Fantasy tile set. And this is what I have so far. This is just one sliver of the entire map that I've managed to get together so far. I think it looks pretty decent for the amount of time that I had to put into it to get it to work. There's plenty of room for monsters to spawn and players to battle them here. There's a couple of noted flaws in the tile set that I can go back and fix in GIMP later on. That won't be much of a problem. Right now we're looking to get an alpha map put out as quickly as possible. Another thing that I wanted to bring up in this video is a attribute of the game that players will be able to take advantage of to earn income even when they're not playing the game, and that is in the form of player-run buff shops. This idea is an amalgamation between two separate games that I played. One I've already touched on, that was RF Online, and the other being Tree of Savior. In RF Online, higher level players, specifically healer class players, or magic users rather, would have a series of buffs that they could offer to other players. So a magic user could buff a scout or a warrior with extra movement speed, extra agility for dodging, or extra defense for damage resistance. And in Tree of Savior, um, you could buff your party members, but it would only last a few minutes. Instead, you could get what was called the Pardoner class. And in that, you could set up a literal kiosk or stall where you could sell your buffs to players as they go by. They would click on your shop and they would click the buff that they want and purchase it. It would remove a piece of fuel from your inventory and it would apply the buff to that player. So you could be offline and running your player run buff shop kiosk and make money even while not playing the game. And because the buffs went off of what your character's intelligence stat was, it was this constant search for who has the best intelligence, who has the highest level buffs. Oh, everybody knows this guy who's always at this spot in town always has the highest intelligence and longest lasting buffs. He's the guy you want to go to. And it was this interesting player run dynamic part of Tree of Savior that I really enjoyed, and I wanted that to be in Noia. So here's how I did that. So player run buff shops is probably actually one of the most extensively coded things that I've ever put into Unity so far. I mean, just look at all these classes and prefabs here. I mean, in comparison to all of UMMORPG, it's not that much, but like for the other add-ons that I've created, I think next to Dungeons, next to Dungeons, the player buff shops is the most extensive, and the reason being is the player-run buff shops rely heavily on client-server communication. There are entities that need to be spawned, there are inventories that need to be tracked, there is money that has to exchange hand from one player to an entity and then back to the owner of the shop's player when they log back on. It is a process of passing things back and forth between one client to the server, back to another client, back to the server, back to the client. Using some old footage of mine here to give a little mild demonstration of what the player shops can do. Once a player opens up their buff shop, they can only drop buffs into it, and they will then be shown what regent is necessary to sell that buff. So the player will need to have a number of ingredients on them, and however many ingredients on them they have is how many times they can sell that buff. And they also specify the cost for each buff, and once they open shop, a little NPC will be spawned in their place. Grab some money here. Other players will then be able to click on that NPC and purchase said buffs. If the originating shop owner is online, they will be locked in place. They can't move while they have that buff shop open. That's not demonstrated here, but that is a feature that is going to happen. If the originating shop owner logs off, the NPC buff shop stays there. And once the player logs back in, they will then be placed back into the position where their buff shop was last seen. And once they close shop, they will gain all the money from their shop that it accrued while they were gone. There's still a couple of kinks to work out with the player buff shop entity that spawns behind the player, namely with copying the player's equipment so it looks like the player is still standing there. They'll have various different shop signs that players can use to distinguish themselves from other, as well as, obviously their armor. Um, but with the redoing of how weapon animations and all of that, it kind of broke those little shop entities, so I have to fix that. But that's all for this week. So, just talking about buff shops in the starting area. I hope to have the starting area fully mapped out by next week, and so you'll be able to see what that looks like, and we'll get to fully explore it together. We'll see you next time.